Hello, everyone. My name is James, and I've been coming to Echo.Church for about a year and a half now. And if you have some time, I'd love to share a story of how I was transformed from a non-believer into a prayer leader. I kind of like that, and I'm thinking about putting it on a shirt if anybody wants one. Anyway, the story begins with a simple invitation. One of my best friends, Shane, invited me on a random Sunday back in February of 2022 to come to a church that he goes to called Echo. And my first reaction was, nah, I'm okay, because at that time I would describe myself as a very skeptical person. I was a very logical type person, and I spent a lot of time in graduate education, sort of being ingrained and being trained in the scientific method and sort of understanding the world through that lens. And to me, religion didn't really make much sense, and there was not much organization behind it. And this idea that God created the universe didn't seem possible, and even crazier that there was this guy that died and then came back to life. I was like, okay, I get it. It's an inspiring story. Like, I grew up in the Catholic Church, but no, that's not really possible. However, I am the curious type. And so I was interested to see what Echo.Church would be like. Plus, I did like the music, and Shane mentioned that the band here at Echo is really, really good. So I figured, you know what? What's the worst that's gonna happen? I get some free tea, I get to enjoy some great music, and I get to hang out with my best friend on a Sunday. You can't really beat that. Now, to my surprise, the message that was shared was not really that boring. I expected it to be, but it wasn't. The message here at Echo actually made a little bit of sense. However, I was still super skeptical. I actually took issue with some of the things that were being said, and I had a few questions that really made me want to come back. Now, a few Sundays after, someone on stage mentioned this thing called Alpha, this group where people come together, they come to Echo, they enjoy dinner, they get to ask some big questions about life and faith and meaning. And I turned to Shane and I was like, I'll join if you will. And I mean, come on, it's free dinner. It's a chance to ask questions, to hear other people and what they have to say about life and this thing called God. It sounded like a great opportunity to put my skepticism to some good use. Well, that spring 22 Alpha turned into a small little group of us getting together over summer. And then I was asked to help out with a group in the fall of 2022, which then led to me actually hosting my own group in the spring of 2023 and again in the summer. Now you might be thinking, why did someone so skeptical keep coming back every Sunday and keep coming back to Alpha? Especially since football is on Sundays and I love me some football, and I teach sometimes at night, and so I actually had to adjust my schedule around just to make Alpha work. But when I look back on things, there's a few things that I noticed. First, what made me want to come back here was the community that I found here at Echo. Being surrounded by people that allowed me to ask questions, that allowed me to process the different confusions and some things that I didn't quite understand, helped me to learn and grow my faith. Trust me, I had a lot of questions. I mean, a lot of questions. I would come to every Alpha meeting with at least 10 questions or major issues that I was ready to talk about, right? I've been thinking about them all week long. I was ready to dive into the conversation with my group. And I give that group, that first group I was a part of, and a big shout out to Michelle, my leader, for allowing me to ask so many different questions to them. Most Sundays, I would also try to track down Pastor Felipe or Pastor Steven so that I can ask more questions of them. And I'm sure by now they're probably thinking, here he is again. What question does he have for me today? And I still remember the first question I asked Pastor Felipe, which was, hey, I have a question about the Big Bang Theory, the creation, and how this all works and how Christianity fits into that. What's your thoughts? Now, the other thing I was learning was that exploring faith and not having the answer was okay. Because initially I was concerned that that was gonna be the thing that prevented me from growing in the first place. And plus, who really wants to talk to the person who's always skeptical? And it actually turns out that my curiosity and my questions are the very things that helped me to explore and grow in my faith, and also to connect with other people who are wrestling with their faith and had questions of their own. And I came to learn that even Jesus had some questions, and some major people in the Bible had a lot of things that they were questioning, some confusions and some things they didn't understand. And it's kind of crazy how people's perspective shifts through that confusion. And that was happening to me, and it seems very counterintuitive. Finally, what I noticed is, probably biggest thing of all, I saw my heart slowly changing over time. Now, have I gotten all the answers? No, not even close. I am still just as curious. I still have more questions that I want to explore. Plus, I've realized that faith not only allows me to ask those questions, but welcomes it completely. And I can keep asking questions for the rest of my life. And I think you kind of get a sense that's like right up my alley. I love that. And I feel like if I had all the answers, that'd be super boring. And let's be real, how many of us actually really want to know the answers to some of the questions that we have? Now, you might be wondering, at what point in the story did everything change for you? And I wish I can point to like a single moment or a single experience or this dramatic thing that sort of just clicked in my life. Now, one of the things I was noticing during this journey, as I was asking all these questions, as I was going through these doubts and these criticisms about God, something was changing, right? My heart was changing. And I slowly started to shift from this perspective of doubt and criticism to approaching faith with trust in God. And I eventually got to a place where things started to connect. And trust me, it took a very, very long time. It was very, very small steps, but I truly believe God exists. I do believe Jesus did die for me and rose from the dead, and that there is power in the Holy Spirit, and that he is doing life with me. And sometimes I need it a lot. Now, the skeptic out there listening to this might say like, James has gone crazy, he's brainwashed, joined a cult, or that this is just some isolated story or incident, or that I've abandoned all logic or scientific understanding. And to that, I would say, test it for yourself. If you call yourself a logical person or a skeptic or that scientific type person, put faith to the test. Observe all the evidence, do your homework, do your research, but be careful, because you might find yourself recording a video for Echo a year later. Just saying. Something else that convinced me to keep exploring and keep asking these types of questions was this immense amount of peace that I was having in my life. Now, what you should know is the year 2022 was not the best year for my romantic life. And what was supposed to be an awesome summer where possibly getting married, possibly buying a home, moving in, starting life, turned out to be a pretty difficult time in my life, a pretty terrible summer. And there were so many times where I told myself like, man, this is not how things are supposed to be going. This is not necessarily the plan that I had for myself. Or I was telling myself, man, I could easily freak out right now. Like, life is chaotic, life is crazy, and I don't know how I'm supposed to be doing these things. But I could not help but shake this overwhelming peace or sense that I was not alone, or things were gonna work out. I didn't know how, I didn't know when, I didn't know what it was gonna look like, but I just felt like it was going to work out. And sure, you can chalk that up to being a positive or optimistic person, but when I look back, I think about how some of the hardest times I was going through was also coexisting with this immense amount of growth in my faith. And that is incredible. I like to control things. I'm a big planner, I'm a big organizer. I'm sure there's a lot of you who can relate to that. But I realized that every time I put faith to the test and asked more and more and more questions, God would show up in these little ways that we now term God incidences. Now, was it perfect? Did I hear God saying, yeah, do this? No. Did I have this overwhelming feeling in my heart? Not really. It was over several months, small steps that I was taking that allowed me to slowly trust God and his plans take over. And when I got baptized in April, I still remember the night before, I was overthinking things like crazy, just pacing in my backyard, sort of wrestling with this decision. Should I do it? Should I not? I don't know. So I just decided, just do what I normally do. I read a few pages of the Bible every day, and I remember reading a few chapters in Romans, and the word faith kept popping up like 50 times. And I was reading things like turning from your old life and baptism and being washed in the Holy Spirit and taking up your cross and starting a new life. I was like, all right, dude, I get it. If this is you and this is what you want me to do, I'm gonna do it, but you better show up, it better be great. And I still remember that day, it worked out perfectly. To the song that was being played over me was my favorite song. I was able to get pulled up on stage very briefly to share my story, which was perfect because my mom was not able to make it and she was able to live stream it on the East Coast. I was able to get baptized by my best friend and Pastor Stephen. The day worked out way better than I could have even planned or even imagined. And from that day forward, I was thinking, why try to control things that I can't, right? And I still struggle with it, but I'm learning to trust God more and more and more. So if you're listening to this video, keep on asking, keep on exploring, right? Matthew 7 says, if you ask, if you seek, you will find. I had no idea that my curiosity would completely change my heart and lead me down this path. And if you would have asked me if I would have been a follower of Jesus back in February of 2022, probably would have laughed in your face and explained all the reasons why you're completely wrong. So if you are skeptical, if you have questions, good. That keeps things interesting, and trust me, I think God can handle any and all questions that you have for him. I can't promise that you'll get them all answered. I can't promise it's gonna be easy, but what I can promise is you're gonna grow and you're gonna learn a lot. Plus, if you have questions, I'd love to chat with you, so come find me.